Okay, everybody. We'll just make a short statement, and then Cam and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Obviously, we're here because this morning Tom Scully advised us that he was leaving Melbourne Football Club and joining Greater Western Sydney. Our understanding is he is leaving for an unprecedented offer in the AFL, in AFL history. And the Melbourne Football Club made Tom an offer. We made one offer. We haven't wavered from that offer, and we were very conscious that we have a great list of players, and we needed to make sure that we didn't look after one player to the detriment of all the other players in our list. It was very important. Our members gave us that message all throughout this year. We'll now be focusing very strongly on the AFL for appropriate compensation. And as a club, look, we still think that Melbourne Football Club is in the best position it has been in for many, many years. We've faced many issues over our 150-year history. The 3 years that our Jim Stein's board has been together and our club has faced many issues. We've overcome all those, and this will be no different. That's really all we'd like to say at this point, and happy to answer any questions to either Cam or myself.
Do you feel, Tom, sort of the way it's all been handled has been disappointing in that, you know, he seemed to assure you all year that he hadn't made up his mind yet? It seems like it was a done deal as soon as the season finished.
Yeah, well, look, we've spoken to Tom regularly throughout the year. We were confident Tom was being honest with us. His discussions with us were open, and we felt that was the best course of action, to believe in Tom until he made his decision.
So you still believe that now?
Well, yeah, we're confident that Tom, dealt with us correctly all the way through the process.
Do you believe you deserve more than a phone call for a decision of such magnitude?
Well, you might want it, but look, you've got to remember here we're talking about something that's probably never happened before in the AFL. There is a lot of money at stake here. I don't think the decision was about anything else than the money, and that's up to Tom to make that decision.
I think the other thing within it all is that it was in the best interest of everyone for a decision to be made as soon as he'd made a decision. This in some ways has been a little bit like a black cloud, which has been over the club for much of the last 12 months. The black cloud now moves on to another club. They've still got priority selections to play out over time, and it'll be someone else's issue from this point onwards.
When did your optimism start to wane? I know you've both been confident, you've taken him at his word. When did you start to think that it swung and that you were going to lose him?
We probably felt very positive, I think, up till the weekend in lots of ways. It was when we realised the offer had gone out to a sixth year, and the amount of money which was actually brought into the first year, we got a bit shaky at that point. We knew that we were asking and pushing with him for a decision to be actually taken, and obviously the last weekend was going to be an important time for us. But as soon as it seemed to me that there was a big push in the last 24 hours or so, and that's when our confidence started to wane.
Do you think the system's wrong? I mean, you said on that subcommittee, and I'm not laying any blame at people who did sit there because it was sort of unknown territory, but the Bulldogs have lost Cohen Ward, now you've lost Scully. Yeah. Is the system fair?
I think the system's being used in a way that it wasn't intended to be used. I think the system was put in place to allow the club to fill out its list with senior bodies, big strong bodies, because they're going to have a group of kids basically playing for them. Well, effectively what they've done is signed with their first three selections 3 kids. So whether that was ever perceived to have happened or was ever going to happen, I don't think anyone saw it that way. It was obviously there to happen, and unfortunately it's played out the way that it has.
So Mick Malthouse said last week, maybe in hindsight, a rule where you couldn't take anyone under 23. Is that something like that should have been implemented, do you think?
I think all those things were discussed. It was clearly the one thing about when you're bringing 2 new teams into the competition, there is going to be pain at some point. The pain was felt by clubs last year when they lost senior players. It's been felt by our club and other clubs this year when they've lost younger players. You don't invent 2 new teams out of nothing in regard to the actual player list, and they need to come from somewhere. That is a price our competition has paid through expansion over the years. Generally, those as a club, we all look at and see what is in the best interest of the competition, and the AFL clubs were supportive of it at that point in time. But we all realised and recognised that it had the potential of coming back and hurting your particular club. We got through it last year with the Gold Coast. We've paid a price here. In the meantime, we've managed to sign every other player on our list, and so we're now protected from this particular issue, and we've still got the great optimism about what our list can actually produce.
What's your idea of fair compensation?
Oh, maximum compensation, yeah. There'd be no question of that.
Which is what?
Oh, well, the same compensation as you would... The rules which will put in, the extra compensation were put in for two players, for two types of players. The first one was what was considered the franchise player, if you like, the Gary Ablett scenario, or what would happen if a club lost an elite young player. And we're talking about a player who was taken as a priority draft selection, he's been paid an extraordinary amount of money, probably, I'd say 30 or 40% more than any other player's ever been paid in 2012. Well, if that being the case,
the Ablett money, you're saying he's still 30 or 40% above Gary Ablett's money?
in a one-year scenario, yes.
The front-ended money?
Mm.
Well, that's Ablett's rumoured to be on $2 million. Well,
Well, I don't know what Gary Ablett's contract is, but I can tell you what Tom Scully's is.
it's 30 or 40% more than that.
Yeah. Well, we've got an extraordinary. What we've said is we've got an unprecedented contract for a 20-year-old.
So is it more than 2 million?
I'm not going to go through it. I've answered that question. Yeah.
Cam, does the turbulence that happened in the last few months of board administrator, does that factor in his decision, or do you think that it did? Or?
Clearly, we addressed those things with him. We hear the same stories as you guys hear, and we sit down and we ask those questions directly, and he gave us his assurances that it hadn't. And the same way as we take him on, face value, we found him to be, a good, honest young man, through the time that we was here. We did pressure him for a decision at the end of the year, and we asked to go through any of the issues which would potentially relate to his decision, and that was certainly taken off the table as any concern of his at all.
And when Jim spoke to him mid-year and he said, look, I can assure you that my management hasn't spoken to GWS, do you believe what he said then?
I have no reason to disbelieve anything that he spoke to us about.
And we've had no reason to doubt Tom all throughout the year. We've been confident about that.
You talk about the dark cloud, Cameron. How much of an effect in hindsight do you think the Scully issues had on the footy club this year?
It's been a distraction. There's no question of that. It's been, when you're trying to build and grow a group and the focus ends up on one individual, and I think, from his own perspective, it was clearly a distraction which had a multiplier effect by the fact that he spent a fair bit of the year trying to get himself physically right. But there's no doubt from anyone's perspective it was at least a distraction. It was probably something that this time last year we never have dreamt would have been an issue for us.
Your reaction's almost like you sort of can't blame him, is it? He's so...
No, I think don't underestimate the ability of an AFL club to move on quickly, and that's our responsibility now. Our responsibility is to get the best compensation we can. We believe the rules will look after that, and the first phone call after receiving a phone call from Tom's management today was to the AFL to seek to shore up that situation, and we'll continue those discussions. And then our deal is to make sure that we get everything else right from this point onwards. And as Don said, we've managed to will our way through 153 years, and we've had to bounce back before, and this is just one of those occasions.
So is that the reason for the one offer then, Cam? And Don mentioned you just made one offer. You knew that you weren't going to be able to compete, and you didn't want to get into a bidding war. This is our best.
Clearly, we weren't going to be able to compete on money. That was never what we were going to be competing on. So we stuck with what we believe was the right offer in the context of our whole playing group.
Cam, there's a lot of, this is improbable, I understand that, but a lot of people say that you lost him spiritually in Shanghai. Is there any substance to that?
No. And even now, to tell you the story would be a breach of confidence, because we had the conversation with him at that time. And it's disappointing that something which was looked after as in the welfare of the individual has actually been talked about as something totally different to that. And one thing which is abounded with this whole issue has been a lot of rumour and innuendo in and around those sorts of things, all of which have been addressed with him personally and all of which were denied with him. And in his case, he almost said that he was embarrassed by the fact that he, as a 19-year-old turning 20, was somehow sitting in judgment of an AFL club. And that being his teammates, his coaches, his administrators, and he was really strong in regard to that. And that's not just from him, that was from his family and his management, who I think publicly also made the same sort of statements. And we're disappointed that somehow what an extraordinary experience for our football club, taking a group of people to China, has somehow been seen as anything other than an outstanding experience for our group. And because we can tell you factually that it's just absolutely incorrect.
But he didn't come home early?
He came home early, but not for that reason, no.
You spoke to Gary and Tom. When did he call in this morning? What was the tenor of the discussion?
I think the tenor of the discussion was, as you would expect from him, that he'd made a decision. It was a difficult decision for him, and but he'd made that call, and the other guys he he chose to speak to the players, the people who he's been involved with over the last little while in supporting, one as the coach and two as someone who's been mentoring, for some period of time, and that was the choice he made. And then obviously, we then move forward.
Do you agree with Dale Holmes that it's a great day for football?
Do I agree with Dale? What I do know is that our club won't be held back by this. That's what I do know. And so our club, as much as it, one thing about AFL clubs, particularly through a development phase, is you do face a bump in the road. This is a bump in the road, but that's all it is. And we'll move forward quickly. They'll celebrate the way that perhaps we would celebrate if we'd managed to recruit a talented young player. And it's, but we move on quickly.
Can you understand your fans and any members being disappointed but also a bit angry with Tom?
I can understand our fans being disappointed, but I don't think there's a more resilient group of fans than the Melbourne Football Club fans, and the supporters of our club who have actually found around $6 million of their own money to ensure that the club is debt free. I think have shown their love of the club, and they'll bounce back.
And I think our fans would have been more angry had we been irresponsible with the way we handled the contract with Tom. So I think they'll respect that.
Yeah, very much.
10, 15 years down the track, Cameron, there might be a 19th or 20th team, and one might think of the AFL in the next year or two.
You're hoping that's someone else's problem
No,
at that particular stage. Mike Sheen will still be
two.
reporting on it.
Yeah. In the next year or two, there might be a working party set up to look at how it all went over the last couple of years with Gold Coast and GWS. What would you suggest they should look at changing possibly for down the track?
Well, it changed a lot between when the Brisbane Bears were set up to when the Gold Coast was set up, and I think we learnt lessons from what happened between the establishment of those two teams, and I'm sure we'd learn similar lessons again.
Cam, do you have to be here for the long haul?
Me personally, yeah, absolutely. I've got a deep love of the club. It's I still get the same thrill coming in every day. Obviously, we've gone through some challenging times together. We've worked through those times, and I'm enjoying it like no other time in my life.
And Cam's a very experienced AFL CEO, as we know, so he's been very helpful during this process, and indeed with our search for the coach and our restructure the football department. So we're looking forward to those challenges coming up.
How much of a challenge has Tom got fitness-wise? We hear about the knee, etc. I mean, to manage that, he's had several knee scares, if you like.
We offered him a 5-year contract, so we did that with the confidence that he'd be fine.
You mentioned that you've signed up all your other players and you had an offer to Tom. Now that offer hasn't been taken up, do you have salary cap room to maybe make a big play for another?
Yeah, but we won't be compromising what we're trying to do in terms of the building of the list. We've got. I said to Tim Harrington before, he's got a bit of smoke coming out of his pockets now. We can. We're now in a situation where we haven't had, or we didn't plan to have, and but it wasn't. We knew that it wasn't beyond the realm either. So we haven't been naive about it in any shape or form. But we don't, as much as there's going to be a shorter term expectation at a performance level, which there should be given the work that we've actually done. We're not compromising from the plan of building a list, and we would say that the list that Melbourne's got now is in as good a shape as any Melbourne list has been for some period of time. As much as we've still got an enormous amount of development to go, and that's being reflected in the conversations we're having with potential coaches who do very much see it that way. It's an unusual coaching job in some ways because of the fact that most clubs they've either tipped over the edge or they're bottoming out. When they're looking for a new coach, where ours it's had 3 or 4 years of good hard yards put into it, and this won't distract from that at all.
How you go with the
We
coaching
keep
scenario?
hearing about the year, and Cam's just reiterated that view. What's your assessment of how Melbourne fared in 2011?
I don't think we reached our own internal expectations, and we're reviewing that now thoroughly, and we'll be ensuring that, obviously there's some major things happening around the club at the moment. New coach is going to be critical, but we really are focusing firmly on hitting next year with a new lease of life, and we're very confident we'll assemble a great team to take us into next year, and there'll be an obsession with reaching our expectations next year.
Cam, could you update us on the coaching process? Are you interviewing or shortlisting?
We made a choice not to get caught up on the daily discussions in regard to it, other than we're very optimistic, obviously, and it's a great opportunity for us, and I think that the response that we've received from those we've spoken to, and we've been sort of targeted, but also open-minded, is such that I think we'll end up in a good place.
Are you chasing your slot?
As we said, we're not going to get caught up in the day-to-day considerations of who's available and who's not available. We said that from the outset.
going back to Tom, you mentioned it was a sort of a black cloud hanging over the club. This system be better if it was more transparent, similar to what happens in rugby league?
I'm not sure. Look, I think there's certain aspects of our game that we've in fact really valued because we haven't gone down, where we know this is an unusual. I assume it's going to be something which the way that free agency could play out that becomes more and more part of our game, and I think we'll have to grow up in and around that. I think it'll take a natural process rather than anything which has to be contrived. I think that's the great thing about our game is that the things that we value in terms of the sort of pure loyalty, I think are still very, very strong in our game, despite what we've had to deal with today. I don't think there's a sport in the world which has managed to maintain that sort of strength of loyalty, and that's partly because of the strength of the rules. But and I don't think we should ever, because of moments like this, ever lose that is so culturally important in regard to our sport.
Are you pretty sure you will get the maximum compensation?
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Could you trade those picks this year?
Yeah, we can. That'll be then a role for Barry Prendergast and Tim Harrington and the rest of our guys to work through how we get the best use. And once you've actually locked it away, it's then about ensuring that we get maximum return. Just one more question.
Brendan Favola's in the news again.
Is he? I haven't heard that.
For the wrong reasons. Apparently, he was out last night.
I'm not going to comment on Brendan Favola.
What about him at Casey next year?
As I said, I'm not going to comment on Brendan. Been a big enough day.
Okay, so there's room for one more question then. You've seen a lot of good kids come into the system. You've recruited a lot of them yourself. Is Scully going to be an elite player?
He'll be. He's got the makings of a player who should have an outstanding AFL career. Yeah.